Hello and good morning. Welcome to this brief video that talks about how to measure productivity in a virtual world. My name is Dr. KDEL, and I'm the lead coach and CEO of KDE Leadership. We provide coaching services for business entities globally, teaching them how to optimize their potential. Today, I'm just going to be doing a 10-15 minute introductory video to one of the coaching programs that we offer. As you can see on your screen, that program is titled Measuring Productivity in a Virtual World. I'm going to go ahead and share with you exactly what I wanted us to learn from this. In the first instance, Measuring Productivity in a Virtual World is a sequel to another coaching program offered by KDEL, which is titled Sustaining Productivity in a Virtual World. As you know, bosses and employees are increasingly working from home, okay? So it's become strategically important to formulate ways for measuring our productivity, especially via remote means. A key objective becomes how to ensure that production stays high amongst remote workers without the specter of micromanagement, okay? And the resultant demotivation that it brings along with it. People just do not like you sitting over their shoulders or calling them or emailing them to ask how the project is going. They want you to trust them, that they understand what the output is, what the deadlines are, and what the quality metrics are supposed to be, and they can work within those confines to deliver the goods. So basically, they want you to leave them alone to get the job done. Now, having said that, you also understand that as leaders and as bosses, we are apprehensive that when we leave our remote workers alone to get the job done, they might be goofing off and we might be falling behind schedule without actually knowing that we're behind schedule until that deadline is passed and we find that we're in trouble. We have a problem about how to explain to our clients that we're behind schedule. So our key question is, would productivity therefore, will the measurement of productivity be easier if bosses and their staff collaborate in setting goals during the planning stages of their operations? Now, that question is very deep because there's a premise that if bosses and their subordinates set goals together, then everybody understands what those goals are. And the subordinates, who are the subject matter experts that are charged with the task of actually executing the project, can make their input at the very beginning to say, hey, listen, this time that you put in for this task might not be enough. This quality expectation might be too high or too low. So they can make their projections or their input earlier on in the process, during the planning process, to ensure that you don't put in stuff that is very difficult to meet up with. Okay, so that's the key question. Would productivity measurement be easier if bosses and their staff collaborate in setting goals during the planning stages of their operations? All right, so today we're going to be looking at this one-day, 3-session coaching program called Measuring Productivity in a Virtual World. And it's going to be focusing on how to establish a measurement instrument, how to track during execution, how to track oneself, okay? Because we're working virtually alone. It's a lonely work, it's a lonely job. You want to be able to track yourself. And of course, we're going to be looking finally at KDEL's recommendations for remotely measuring the productivity of virtual workers. All right, so having said that, there are a few questions we have to consider as we go into this program, as you consider whether this is a program you want to enroll your supervisory staff to engage in so that they can properly measure the productivity of their remote workers. First question is, have you set up productivity targets for your team? Number 2, do you have methods for tracking their productivity? Number 3, do those methods encourage micromanagement and inspire team members? And then number 4, did all your stakeholders collaboratively set goals, meaning together? Did we set the goals together? These are a few questions to consider as we move on. Okay, now, a famous business writer, a guru called Peter Drucker, has a mantra. He says that what gets measured gets managed. If you can successfully measure an amount of work or a process of work, then you can manage it. Having said that, we're going to dive into how to measure, okay? What to measure and what tools and techniques we're going to be using to measure. And that's part of what this program will be focusing on, with training your leaders on. Your leaders and supervisors are going to learn that in order to establish measurement instruments, you have to plan, number 1, by developing a WBS and a Gantt chart. A WBS is an acronym for a work breakdown structure, okay? And a Gantt chart, we know what that is. It's a pictorial, graphical representation, okay, of progress of work. And of course, aligned to those progress of work are the resource personnel who will actually accomplish the work. So that's a Gantt chart. Secondly, your leaders are going to answer certain questions. Do they involve their frontline stakeholders during planning and estimation? It's not just enough to plan, but you have to understand that adding costs and time paraphernalia to your planning is what is called estimation. Okay, you have to estimate how much time it's going to take and how much money it's going to take to get this job done. And then your leaders will have to answer the question, did they add buffers to your planning schedules? These are all instruments or strategies we're going to be using during the training to take leaders to the level where they can set up their productivity in such a way that it can be measured very successfully. Okay, so now diving into what this measuring productivity program would entail, we need to answer certain questions during planning, okay? When you use your WBS and Gantt charts, what questions you're going to be answering are, what tasks must be completed? In what order must they be completed? How much time is adequate for completing the tasks? What project management software are you utilizing? Now, there's so many of them out there. There's MS Project, there's Project Libre, there's Concept Draw Project, there's Asana, etc. There's just so many of them out there. Okay, for our own, when we are going to be teaching our people on measuring productivity, we're going to be focusing on Concept Draw Project and maybe Microsoft Project. Okay, now the final question you have to consider while planning and utilizing the WBS is, do you have a Gantt chart and a network diagram? And we're going to be describing what those things mean as we go. Remember, these are tools and instruments your people have to be conversant with to use. And not only do the superiors and bosses and managers and supervisory officers need to know how to use that, but they have to teach their people how to use the finished product and how to use it to track themselves. Because remember, they're all working virtually. All right, that said, we have other questions we must grapple with involving frontline stakeholders during planning. Did you involve your probable field executors of the tasks in the planning and estimation exercise? Did you accord subject matter experts, and these are the acronym SMEs, okay? Did you accord them the status, okay, for their inputs? Did you accord subject SME status to their input? Because these lower level staff we talk about are actually the subject matter experts. They're the people on the front lines, in the trenches, who know exactly what it takes to get these jobs done or these tasks executed, where their recommendations fully embraced by leadership. We have to teach your leaders how to take feedback. Most leaders think they know it all, but we have realized that the world is changing at a fast pace. Some of the stuff we learned as older practitioners to get stuff done, we found that they've been overtaken by events, by software, by artificial intelligence, by new ways of doing things that we don't fully understand. And we have to allow the younger folk who are more tech savvy to step in and be able to make their input and allow them the leeway to get the job done. So the recommendations that they have as to how to execute these tasks Did your frontline, did your leaderships take that into consideration as they put together a final working plan? That's something we have to bear in mind. Now, when you want to add on remote inspired buffers, there are certain questions you have to look at again in order to measure productivity. Did you include time buffers between tasks? It's always important to put a time buffer between the end of one task and the beginning of another. It gives your people time to breathe, time to switch their minds from one task to another type of task, okay? Sometimes those tasks are not handled by one person. And so it gives them time to finish one task and hand it over to the next person. That output from that stage becomes an input into the next stage. Did you add a time buffer in there to ensure that there is a proper transfer, an efficient transfer of resources, of personnel, of expertise from one task to the other? Did you give extra time for download and upload of activities between tasks? When things are done and there's an output, it has to be uploaded into the FTP site, okay, into the cloud for others to be able to download and get on with their own work, okay? And this is when we talk about finish to start relationships. So in order to make sure that measurement of productivity is done successfully, you must include remote inspired buffers during the planning stage. How to do this is some of what we're going to be teaching in the coaching program to our leaderships and to our planners, okay? Now, you also want to know where final schedules agreed upon by frontline and leadership stakeholders. The leaderships can say this is a final schedule, but they have to run it through the frontline guys who will get the job done as well. This is our final blueprint. We want to run it back to those who will actually use it to get the job done in the trenches to make sure that final footprint is acceptable to everyone, okay? So that's another question. Now that you've finished planning your work, it's important to work your plan. It's one thing to put together a measuring instrument to get things done, is another to actually use it in the trenches to get stuff done. And remember, what we want to get done here is not just to sustain productivity, but to measure that productivity while our workers are performing their duties remotely, okay, away from the office. So having said that, now you've planned your work, you've got to work your plan. So the question we ask ourselves here is, we measure our productivity by tracking our progress during execution. How do we track our progress during task execution? We track using the Gantt chart, and we track by leveraging the network diagram, okay? Now, this training program will show enrollees how to use these two instruments to self-track, so bosses and managers do not have to micromanage, by finding creative ways to track subordinates from afar. Let me repeat that again. This training program will show enrollees how to use these two instruments to self-track, the Gantt chart and the network diagram. This is so that bosses and managers do not have to micromanage, okay? They have to now find creative ways to track their subordinates from afar by using the Gantt chart and the network diagram. And we'll be showing you how this can be done without ruffling the feathers of those who actually do the work, okay? In a nutshell, tracking with the Gantt chart involves reviewing task dependencies and durations, following up team members handling predecessor tasks, staying connected with team members waiting on their task completion before theirs can commence, and of course, adhering, sticking to the Gantt chart. Once you've done that, we're going to also look in a nutshell what it entails to leverage the network diagram, okay? Now, leveraging the network diagram involves identifying and sticking strictly to the schedules of tasks that are critical to the entire team. And that means the tasks that fall along the critical path. We're going to be also sharing with your leaders what the critical path is, and the activities that lie along the critical path and how they must address those activities, okay? You want to identify also tasks with buffers, meaning you got to look at slacks of activities that have more than a zero value. Okay, those are tasks with buffers. When you talk about a buffer, you're talking about a little more time has been embedded into those tasks to take care of unforeseen events or circumstances, okay? Now, in order to also use the network diagram to measure productivity, you got to coordinate remotely with other team members. You got to learn how to lend a helping hand to those that are experiencing schedule slippage, okay? In a nutshell, you are developing your executive currency. We're going to be talking about executive currency when we talk about measuring productivity in a virtual world. In order to self-track, you and your team members must share the tracking instruments. It's as simple as that. This means that every team member should have a copy of or should have access to the WBS, the Gantt chart, and the network diagram. The importance of FTP sites where these are uploaded and downloaded from should not be overemphasized. We should emphasize on that access to, okay? The WBS, the Gantt chart, and the network diagram. And so that means that every team member has to be oriented on how to use these instruments to ensure they know how to decipher them and how to use them to track themselves. Remember, the emphasis is on using these instruments to track ourselves because we're working virtually remotely away from each other. We're not co-located. So it's important that they learn how to track themselves with a uniform instrument that is uniform to every team member and accessible to every team member and is current to every team member. Slacks and the critical path should be clearly outlined to all team members. We'll be sharing with them how to identify what the slacks for each activity is, how to identify which is the critical path, because it's in knowing these two that you're able to adhere strictly to the stipulations of critical path activities. So, what are KDEL's recommendations for measuring productivity in virtual work environments? As we close, because right now we're still looking at measuring productivity in a virtual world. What do we in our team recommend to your company so that you can accurately and more effectively measure the productivity of your virtual work employees? Number one, KDEL will show you how to leverage the WBS, the work breakdown structure, to measure productivity. KDEL will show you how to use the Gantt chart and the network diagram to measure productivity in work from home situations. KDEL will show you how to use time buffers, cost buffers, and padding to schedules and estimates to self-track your performance. How sharing these tools we've mentioned, how sharing these tools with all team members and training them on how to use the tools helps in tracking ourselves, that's your leaders, and themselves, your subordinates who are working virtually. So you're not only tracking yourself, but you're also tracking those that you supervise from a virtual perspective. And you only do that by utilizing these tools and making these tools accessible to them. Finally, how using milestones. I haven't discussed milestones here. We talked about that a little bit in measuring productivity in a virtual world, in sustaining productivity in a virtual world, I'm sorry. So how using milestones while developing your Gantt charts and network diagrams create avenues for supervisors to review the work of their subordinates, and they create opportunities for all team members to celebrate small wins. I've talked about celebrating small wins, and it's akin to someone who is running a marathon. When you're running a marathon, you might be running 42 miles for as many hours as it takes you to complete that. But if you break it up into milestones, what happens? Every 100 yards, you stop and you rest. Every 100 yards, you stop and you rest. What happens? You get to the end of your marathon fresher. You get several times at the end of each milestone to review what you've done, correct any mistakes there might be, and get patted on the back for a good job well done so far. That's what we call celebrating small wins in leadership circles. And it is very important to break your jobs up into small, manageable chunks. That's what we call milestones, so that your people get a chance to stop there, relax, rest, celebrate, and come back with more power and enthusiasm to do the next phase of work. All right. So now, having said all this, this is what this program is going to do, teaching your people how to get all these things done, your leaders and your virtual workers as well. So you're asking me now, what are the next steps we should be following in order to catch up or to take advantage of what KDEL is offering, okay? As you can see from your screen, KDEL will help you with your productivity measurement needs, okay? What we'll ask you to do right now as you watch this video is go ahead and go to this link, okay? You go to kdleadership.com/coaching and it says measuring productivity in a virtual world. You go there, you click on it. It will open up a page on our website that describes this program a little bit more and then allows you to enroll. The pricing that you see there is individual pricing, and then we have also put in some kind of discount to ensure that if you're registering 2 or 4 people, you get a huge discount. Okay, so let's say you want to register 20 of your employees. You can do that in chunks of 4. So instead of paying, let's just say $5 for 20 people, which is $100, you're going to be paying $15 for 3 people, for 4 people, and then you're going to be making a saving as you go on. So it's up to you as a leader in your organization, as a decision maker, to make up your mind about that. Now, you want to talk a little bit more about that, you need to talk with somebody, go ahead and schedule a free 30-minute appointment with us from calendly.com/KDLeadership/30 minutes. Just as I've shown you here, go ahead and click on that. You will see our online calendar. You will schedule a time to have a 30-minute talk with us so that we can answer your questions concerning this program. All right, so I just left it here for a little bit just so that you can have access to this and you can see that. I want to thank you for joining us today. There are other coaching programs that we offer at KDE Leadership, and they're all on this link down here. If you go to this link down here, I'm going to highlight that. Okay, kdleadership.com/products is going to open up a list of our products, of which some of these are there. Okay, I've highlighted these because they have a bearing to what we've talked about today. Okay, we have a coaching on executive leadership for your leadership. We have a coaching on how to manage change and diversity in virtual organizations. We have a program on how to manage scarce human resources and how to empower your people, all this in a virtual environment. We have a program on how to sustain productivity in a virtual world. We have a program on project management, knowledge, skills, and attitudes. We call that project management KSAs. Okay, we have another one on how to set up a project management office and manage it. We have another one on a project management software training that teaches you, really goes in depth on how to use Concept Draw Office, on how to use MS Project. And then finally, we do have a coaching program on how to manage your teams and how to intrinsically motivate them. Having said that, you can go, as I said, to this link here, and it will give you a list of that. You will see links on those. When you go to each link, it opens up what you need to look at. And in order to give you just a little bit of a heads up on what you're going to be seeing there, I'm just going to be showing you that link. Let me just show you that link very, very briefly. Let me just access that right now and share that with you. Okay. Just share that with you. And this is a link to our products. I just wanted you to see that a little bit. Once you hit those, kdleadership.com/products, this is what you're going to be seeing. And when you hit each link, it tells you exactly, it opens up another page that shows you exactly a description of each of these. So having said that, I want to say thank you very much for being with me today. If you have any questions, send us an email to support@kdeleadership.com. Again, this has been just a brief video presentation showing you what your team will gain by enrolling in our program, Measuring Productivity in a Virtual World. Take care of yourself out there, and thank you for being here.